Island biodiversity, shaped by unique traits and isolated ecosystems, is exceptionally fragile in the face of invasive predators. The evolution of specialised flora and fauna on islands leaves them more vulnerable to invasive species. Non-native predators can upset the ecological balance, threaten native species, and necessitate conservation efforts to protect the extraordinary biodiversity of isolated islands, such as here in the Cape Horn Biosphere Reserve. In the first episode, we looked at native waterfowl populations that inhabit the Navarino Island in the Cape Horn Biosphere Reserve and what makes them vulnerable to predators. The native birds here are very vulnerable to invasive species such as the American mink, and in this next episode we'll be learning about the research that is trying to understand the impacts of the American mink on the native waterfowl populations.
My awareness of impact of invasive species down here in Patagonia is fairly low. I would say though an invasive species would be a dog or ravens will probably be predators. I'm not sure exactly what species are around here, but as species move their ranges, whether they're naturally introduced or an invasive species, they interact with the natural environment, and sometimes those interactions aren't very beneficial for the native populations.
Even in the most isolated of places, there can be multiple invasive species with significant ecological impact. On Navarino Island, the main island in the Cape Horn Biosphere Reserve, considered to be one of the last wilderness areas on the planet, there are non-native species including the American mink, horses, cows, domestic dogs, beavers and muskrats.
I think we've learned a number of times already that once a population has been introduced, it's very difficult to control it. So if people are interested in building, fisheries and things like that are introducing other species, then they have to really take into consideration that those native populations will possibly be impacted by that introduction, and that they might get out of control, and that'll be more costly to control an invasive species than it would be to not introduce them at all.
The American mink, native to North America, has been transported around the globe for fur farming. It is one of the most widely distributed species in the world. It can be found in more than 30 countries. The mink was introduced in Argentina and Chile in the 1930s and was detected on Navarino Island in the Cape Horn Biosphere Reserve for the first time in 2001. The elusive predator is hard to find and is a small, thin mammal with black-brown fur. The mink's adaptability, generalist diet, and versatile hunting in both land and water make it a threat to native wildlife. It preys on ground-nesting birds and their ducklings, limiting the survival rates of nests and the more long-term survival of the species. Researcher L.K. Schudler from the Cape Horn International Centre has conducted extensive research about the presence of minks on Navarino Island, their habitat preferences and diet to understand the impacts on native waterfowl.
So the diet of mink is interesting because if you go out and find scats in different habitats, for example, along the coast, along rivers, along lakes, and during different times of the year, you can see how the diet of mink shifts and adapts to the availability. So, for example, in a study where I found 500 scats, we found that mink were more often preying on birds during the summertime and in lagoons. And they preyed more on mammals in the wintertime when birds are also less available because there are a lot of migrating birds. So you can have you can get an insight in how adaptable the mink actually is.
The Valeria Gomez Silva has been using camera traps to study the presence of minks and waterfowl on islets, which are very small islands of the Cape Horn region, addressing a critical research gap in these less explored areas.
Fuimos a pequeños islotes cerca de la costa para también revisar si las aves nidificaban en estos espacios y además si es que había bisón. Para eso colocamos una cámara trampa que estaba al frente de una lata de atún semiabierta, como para traerlo. Y bueno, ese fue uno de nuestros descubrimientos, que en realidad en todos los islotes había bisón. Entonces, y que además estos lugares se utilizan en general como refugios de nidificación para las aves. Entonces ya sabíamos que aquí en la isla como grande de Navarino había bisón y pensábamos que por eso mismo las aves se estaban moviendo a los islotes, y ahora también descubrimos que los bisones también están ahí.
Ongoing research focuses not only on minks, but on waterfowl that are vulnerable to these predators. Among the species most at risk on Navarino Island are ground-nesting solitary birds, including the flightless steamer duck, the Kelp Goose and the Upland Goose. A triannual consensus has been conducted on foot by researchers from the Cape Horn International Centre. Equipped with binoculars, they meticulously identify waterfowl, note the presence of ducklings and identify their habitat preferences.
2 names, maybe 3 names.
I had the opportunity to join Carlos Valeris from the Cape Horn International Centre during one of these surveys. He explained that the census has been ongoing since 2009 and that the survey is crucial for providing long-term information about bird population numbers, trends and habitat preferences. He told me how important the data is for making informed management decisions, including the protection of sites where these vulnerable birds are most abundant, safeguarding them against threats such as the mink. Even though there is evidence that minks prey on the waterfowl, we don't fully understand how minks are affecting current bird populations on Navarino Island, and what other contributing factors may exist. What kind of research is necessary to clarify this? The demanding nature of current survey methods prompts a discussion into more efficient and collaborative data collection approaches. Could harnessing citizen science provide faster insights and assist in developing management initiatives? Having identified the preferred habitats of waterfowl and mink, the critical question arises: what conservation strategies should be implemented to safeguard waterfowl from invasive predators? Let's find out in the next episode.